the leader, but I think he'll be just fine in year 6.
Nice play by George. He knocks it down. He has 4. Clippers out in front, 38-20.
On the court together, that immediately makes your defense much more potent.
Offense doesn't look too bad either with
at all.
11 now.
Raises on the 40-yard dash, but he is such a brilliant player and knows how to handle himself down there. Beautiful move by KO.
Baseline shot. Utah's working on a 60-point game. Deep 2, just inside the 3-point arc.
Over the 50% mark. George creates separation, launches in the mid-range, continues to be on automatic pilot. He looks terrific. He's got 14.
So effortless. Gets to his
round. You see him wearing the number 22. Patrick O'Neal referenced your 22 years going forward after your jersey at Ohio State. He wore your jersey.
There were some reports, they weren't accurate, that he wasn't going to start the season. He was going to have to sit on the bench. Well, you mentioned it. A full healthy roster starting camp. You're seeing the early season results.
Here's Paul George, who had 9 points in the first half, took only 4 shots, and he knocks that one down to start the 3rd quarter. We showed you Russell Westbrook.
More than Harden, folks. Harden was second most time handling the ball.
Josh Hart, good defense, but Paul George, better offense.
Yeah, George.
71, Brooklyn. George picked up by Bridges. The pick, the jumper, it's good. Paul George.
Tonight is helping on the backside with Terrence Mann on Gilliard.
George, mid-range, back-to-back mid-range shots.
From behind the 3-point line. So that's 5 to 10 right there between 2 players. The scouting report said they're struggling from behind that.
Paul George knocks it down.
I get it, but it's bringing out the best in these players.
It's a shot by Paul George. And it's a good one. And running for 2, and he's got 8.
Who's going to win small ball here?
George inside, into Brown. He gets it to go, forcing the issue. And George. And Caldwell Pope will defend. Shot clock at 5. Paul George.
What a shot.
He's got Russell Westbrook. Paul George with 29. And now 31, defended by Caldwell.
Game as a career 34% three-point shooter, hitting over half of his triples.
Contested jumper for George. It falls nevertheless.
That was a tough one, though, where you have to ball fake, then get set again and let it fly.
9 for his last 16 before that. Paul George, 39% this season.
He's done a great job just getting physical and rooting him out of the paint area.
Paul George off the inbound for 2. 16 for Paul George. Paul George. World class.
The other night, now boarded the Spurs by 2. George.
Mid-range games just nasty.
Losing streak. Timing of this meeting turns out to be not.
It's away.
A nice pass by Hart, the extra pass by Mann. George sheds his defender, mid-range en route. Clippers 3 for 5 from the field. Pelicans 5 for 6. Paul George, that's his second basket. 24, they're trying to run through the tape here. Pick up their 7th win of the season. George, mid-range jumper, it's good. He has 25 to pace the way for the Clippers.
Could you make that play call any sense?
2-3 zone, they've got a ton of size on the floor right now.
Lob it over to the top to Paul George. The turnaround is pure. Paul George. Barnes guarding George. Pardon me, Paul George. 12-footer rattles home with that feathery touch.
And the core of this group and what Mike Brown is doing with that coaching staff is moving them in the right direction.
Paul George with the midi.
Think about your shot selection. This is a really good team when it comes to guarding the 3 ball.
Paul George is taller than Corey Joseph and shoots over it all. Still great defense, but in our league. The rebound, and the Clippers look to strike here. A 3-on-1 power play if they hurry. George pulls up on the mid-range. It's good.
First on the other team. I
There's no question about it. When you're going up against somebody you're very close with and you respect, you're going to beat him now.
Guarding him.
Yeah.
But John Collins is sort of his peer in terms of size, right?
Yeah, as George hits the jumper. By the way, Fontecchio missing both of those free throws for Utah. They're at all in the comeback win against Denver last time out as George splash. 14-point game. George fading. He got it. 20 for Paul George.
Good ball movement here by the Clippers, but a great closeout by Sharp. Just 2 to shoot for George from the nail. Can't do it. Back-to-back buckets in the mid-range for the Clippers.
And I like it. The Clippers.
Clippers have been much better in moments like this for the past few weeks as George rises in mid-range. And you shall receive, Mr.
Pops off and picks up the next man. You cannot let them drive all the way clear path to the basket.
Mid-range for George. He puts it in. He's 10-17.
She has a title. He was the head coach. Yeah, I talked to Brian before the game. Here's George. Jumper good. And Ty Lue. Paul George guarded by Hield. George has another field goal. He's got 23.
And a crack here on Paul George out on the perimeter. Let's see what George does. We got a little push off there. We've seen that shot from Paul George a ton.
Cut without it, and they get rewarded.
George picked up by White. Good defender. Launches from 15. And Paul George is a pretty good offensive player. PG now 3 for 4. Pay off his student loan. Not highly recruited out of high school. Wound up playing in Colorado. Here's George. Knocks down long 2.
Celtics waiting for Harden, make him give the ball up, get it out of his hands.
George, early shot clock, mid-range, it goes. Paul George is in one. Are either three-pointers or at the rim. 82-60. Long 2 for George. It's good. He's in a zone. Unfortunately, doesn't have any.
You like to see some of the better players that have established themselves in this league being able to play at a high level.
George rises and connects. Paul George passes. George gets a screen from Tice. Given the mid-range, pulls the trigger, knocks it down. Paul George.
Sending out orders.
George creates space, steps back. Oh, that is such a tough shot, right? He's been very good. Absence of Morant. Paul George gets his first touch, rises in the mid-range, and the shot is good. And the Clippers are on the board.
There's the long fingers of Jackson knocked it out.
George curls, catches, and connects. Just his second basket. Bounded. George ahead of the horn. For Memphis. Go! George. And it goes for Paul George. He's got 18. A big bucket there. He's been very special tonight. 13. Starting in place of Kawhi Leonard. George contested 15-footer. It is good. Paul George with 21. Like a larceny. Here comes George the other way, picking the pocket of Tyler Hero. Rises in the mid-range and knocks it down. Back-to-back buckets for Paul. Never left the game, but was hobbling around for a possession or 2 late in the second quarter. Paul George knocks down the mid-range shot, and PG now has 13. Temple. Fancy pass there by Harden. Goes back to George. He's been the cash cow in this third quarter. Spins his way to freedom and knocks it down. Paul George with 21.
Look out, the bouquet getting ready to check in here. Here is George at the free throw line, extended pull up, looking for the bounce, and he will get it.
Friendly rims here early for the
best so far this season. Paul George up against Zion. Good job defensively, but that guy is smooth. They got George, who's going to good front by Jose, but it's going to be a fall.
Raise over top.
Bad matchup for the Pels and a timeout for the Pels. 2:40.
His rest at the 6:40 mark, and see what they do defensively now.
Paul George over that. Paul George is right into the little pick and roll, snake dribble, runner in the lane.
George on the wing, it's good again. Paul George now with 5
of his career, and he's still here, still getting it done. It's great to see.
George, another jumper falls for Paul George.
He might have a little beef with me tonight.
I'm here for the team, Christina.
Report on that national championship that happened tonight. Jim.
Batted around, George recovers in a sea of white jerseys. Can't get it to go. Pull back to George. Pay dirt. Third time the charm, and the Clippers. George on Barnes. Westbrook back to George for the mid-range. It's good. George with 14. Great play by Russ.
Russ being paid for the Clippers. Can they take advantage?
George rises above a double team and puts it in. 21 from George. Base. Tice rolls. Paul George, top of the key. This Clipper team has.
Paul George seemed like he's on the verge, and both sides seem motivated to get an extension done as well. And he's hoping to fall into a loop right after them. He's going to be a free agent this summer.
Offensive rebound by Mann, and the shot clock resets. George against SGA. Those two continue to go back to that consistent number 2 spot behind Gilgeous Alexander. Will it be Williams? Will it be Holmgren? What a shot by George. As he
possessions, his first 2 buckets of the second half. He's got 22. George shakes Reeves. Oh, here he comes.
Plumlee to Paul George. George with a jumper, and it's good. Prior to the start of the game.
I'm really anxious to watch George back. And sometimes it's the way his schedule is. I bet I've seen it maybe twice.
James Harden said, I've done it all. I'm here for one reason. I think everybody knows what that is. Gives it up to Paul George, who buries it. Westbrook down the lane. Harden, top side to George. George turns, fires, fills it up.
Well done by the Pistons.
Screen for Leonard from Paul George. George will turn and fire and fill it. He splashed that one down, got no iron at all.
Well, you saw the effort to get this Jaden Ivey. He hasn't had the ball a lot, but a few times he has. He's been aggressive, and he's putting pressure right into the chest of the Clippers.
Paul George over Cade that time.
That preceded the finish.
Paul George over Cade with a jumper. Switch. He has 10.
The injured Zubac. Paul George. He's been playing with the injured left groin. Looks good on the baseline. Josh Smith is here tonight. And Joe, never said a word, much like Kawhi. Yep. PG. That's a 2.
Here's George. Working against McCollum. And there's his first field goal.
5 rebounds a night. This man should be getting 2 or 3 offensive rebounds a night.
So up around what? Maybe 10 a game? 8 a game? Paul George with the mid-range. 2 bodies on Leonard. Jones and Williamson. Out to George. 6.5 to go in the game. Paul George!
Lost 2 straight away. Oh, it's good, and that is a good sign. Back-to-back buckets for Paul George. Made it halfway there. Harden in the Clippers control. And they trail by 2. George, tough shot. Oh, gets a friendly roll. And Paul George down with 8. On all of their wins, they score at least 110 points. They are on pace for all 3 of those things here. And the Clippers better wake up. Paul George knocks down the jump. Clippers are down by 4. They led by 10 in the first quarter. They have trailed by 13. George pulls up and knocks it down and cuts the lead in half. 9 to shoot. George posting on Conley. And shoots right over the top of him. Second bucket for George.
And Paul George knew that the double team was coming. So smartly caught it quick, shot it quick.
Zubac missed 9 games with a calf injury. Kawhi Leonard not playing tonight, just the 5th game that Kawhi Leonard has missed as Paul George connects from mid-range.
One can grow into being an all-star caliber player if he's not already there.
3rd season for Kuminga. Paul George.
NBA has had a green light once upon a time, so it's really easy to play off of great players like the Thunder had and be able to find your looks within the system. And Isaiah Joe doing
when they lead through 3 quarters. Grizzlies have a league-leading 8 victories when trailing through 3. Paul George makes it a 4-point game.
15 rebounds last night in that loss to the Lakers. George on Shamet. What was it that he said? Tua's done a lot of work here in his first quarter. He leads all Clippers with 7. George. I'll tell you what, he had some up
behind that, so that's the area too. If you stay focused and concentrated on the defensive end.
George in the mid-range, it's good.
Paul George, the midi. Third field goal of the game. 3 for 11.
In the game for Minnesota. He's played 30 minutes in this game, so.
Paul George got the bounce.
Here's George from mid-range.
They're going to be able to hit a lot of those shots for it.
Green, Pat Beverly, Gallinari, Bobby Portis, Pat Connaughton. Paul George, tough shot. PC was.
Shot clock down to 4. George has to launch. Just got it off. And just the way they. Van Vliet on Leonard. A couple of former teammates, champions with the Raptors in 2019. Paul George laces the mid. Paul George discovering his rhythm a little bit. Working off the bounce. A little quick sit dribble. And scores it over Smith. PG 13.
George. Oh, shows off the handle. Great defense by DeSumo, but George knocks it down. 10-foot shot goes 4. Almost halfway there. Here's George the other way. Elbow jumper. It's good. Paul George with 3. George the other way with 5:50 to play in the third. George attacks. We are tied at 67.
Get that series win in 20 years. A lot of that success will also depend on if and when let's move their PG. Carl Anthony Towns returns from that meniscus injury.
In that mid-range moves they go to. DeRozan trying to stick with George. Just enough separation for the lengthy Paul George.
They 5 of the last 6 of the last 7.
Paul George, and you saw the switch. I think a lot of people have said that.
I think he might have stolen it. I heard him say that. Seriously.
Oh, man. Paul George continues second half.
The high lows working. The big lineup is working.
Yeah, good adjustment by Donovan. He got the separation he needed. Paul George, the LA native who...
And allowing the defense to kind of run by you, and then using that elasticity at the rim.
Paul George, remember the last game here, boy, they beat. Now Paul George trying to get it, and he will. Tough shot into contact. That's tomorrow night. Go to pelicans.com/tickets. Pelicans.com/tickets. We'll see you here. Mid-range, George. Too good a look.
It's tough because they're in.
Hurt is hurting.
Yeah. Landed foot on his hip, maybe. Paul George's fall away. That's play. Paul George finding space and finding the mid-range.
So smooth. He is so.
George on the advance. Puts Henderson on his hip. Banks and Clippers leading here by 14.
Zone defense again, and Paul George just hides in the middle. That's a smart play. He had Kawhi Leonard.
Basketball team, the Clippers, same two teams. Friday, the world champs. We're here on Saturday night. Off the screen, whirling into a 15-foot jumper is Paul George. 14 for Scoot tonight. 9 minutes left here in the fourth. George turns, faces, fires. Yes, sir, Paul George. Not going to. That first half was kind of rough. Grambling State, man, they let him play. Paul George with it. Fires over Scoot and scores. For 2 firsts and 2 seconds. In this summer's NBA draft, here's George. Turnaround jumper and the key is good for Paul George.
Gray Jr. has struggled from the three-point line, but he can play. George in the mid-range. Boy, he is on one right.
Things that can be taken care of as we bleed into the end of the season, but it's very important that we start that process. The Clippers started now, because now Jim Jackson.
Oh my goodness! George gets a screen from Zoo, keeps the ball, creates the contact, mid-range and root. It is good.
Defensively,
Clips need to lock in a lot more. That's why I was saying get that shooting percentage down.
George from 15, it's good.
But he got lucky by that one. See if we can capitalize right here offensively.
George rises and knocks it down. Paul George.
Picking you to do. You are positive. I love it. It was good to have you back for one game, Jim.
Wow, throw me under the bus, man.
No, because I'm not
clearing the bench a little bit, and when we said it though, it was going to be on the other side.
Okay, I've done my job. Here you go, Bossa. You do the rest. Throw it up the mouth.
Hornets bounce you tonight. 2 dunks for Bridges, 2 dunks for Richards. And no one can stop Paul George right now. He's been there and done that. He's seen worse. Paul George trying to stem the tide. Oh, my goodness. This guy is... he's the goods, man.
1 or 2 each time he's gone there tonight. That's his 3rd trip.
Paul George, he just rises up. De'Aaron Fox. Here's Alex Lynn trying to close out on Paul George. George, and they're going to...
Yeah, they will arguably the best starting 5 in the game.
Nuggets and the Celtics can make that case as Paul a Jokic triple-double in that game. That was here in Los Angeles. Paul George rises up, knocks it down. Starting to fill it now. Harden gets stuck. George with KCP on him. Big screen by Zubac. Paul George. And he's getting absolutely like the Clippers. They just don't have the experience that the Clippers do. There's a good shot of Will Hardy. Meanwhile, Paul George creates space and then some. And the Clippers have hit all 5 of their shots.
On 15-2. Jazz now trail in the first quarter by double figures for the 31st time. That leads the league in the NBA. Paul George continues to
in the league, young players. It's about getting better at understanding offense. But I think more importantly, PG knocks down another mid-range.
Their first lead, they've trailed by as many as 8. George, the pull-up from 10. It's good. And this just assists for Cleveland here. And we just started the 3rd quarter. George tries to challenge Mobley. He's got the long reach. Oh, it's a roof scraper from Paul. George with Strus lurking in the background. Launches in the mid-range. Oh, it's good! 37 for George! 7 to shoot for George. 3 to shoot. Gets down, lets it fly for the lead. Hot damn! Suns, meanwhile, not feeling good about any shot that they are currently taking. George on a tough pull-up. Stretch with Zubac on the floor, and they were so intent on trying to get him the ball each. As Paul George with easier to complete the process. George working on Allen. He got an extension on that arm and hits. George letting clock run. His 3. Banks in. Why not?
James Harden had 28 points, 8 assists. He went 6 of 11 from 3-point territory on Sunday. George, and that's the problem with trying to will it in. Right. Doncic is going to take a seat. Irving in. George, fend off. Jumper is pure. Calhoun was checking him out during that timeout.
Very Hulk Hogan-ish.
Yeah, very Hulk Hogan-ish. Paul George nailed.
Thank you. Excellent defense, just better offense from Paul George, who already is in double figures as a kid growing up. He's got 11 points. Paul George connects there. George now with 12 clock. George, baseline jumper's good. 16 for George. Good.